Karibu tena sana, and right now we are on to a very interesting, informative and educative kind of conversation. Just take note that June being the Infertility Awareness Month, we are set to interrogate the percentages that are out there in terms of our Kenyan context when it comes to both genders in terms of infertility, the causes of this kind of issue, and if at all there exists any kind of alternatives for the couple that could be identified as infertile. Dr. Kireki Omanwa, who is a fertility expert, current president at Kenya Obstetrical and Gynaecological Society, KOGS, and also a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Medicine, is my guest this morning. Karibu sana to the program, Daktari.
Asante sana.
All right. Now, let's start by understanding the percentages that are out there, particularly, again, just as I mentioned, to our Kenyan context. When you talk about women and you talk about men, what data is out there when you look at infertility? Now, why I ask that is because even as we speak right now, within our if I should say Kenyan culture or Kenyan context, we still have places, communities, societies and families who end up sending the women back to their parents' house because huyu hawezi za
back to sender.
Back to imagine.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the studio today. And as you said in your introduction, June is an Infertility Awareness Month. And we've actually been, COGS as a society, that is the Kenyan Obstetrical and Gynaecological Society, has had quite a number of, activities in the newspapers, what we're doing right now. We are trying to open up this space. We are trying to demystify the stigma of infertility. Infertility affects a huge number of Kenyans. If we were to look at the Kenyan population, and let's just work with a round figure of about 50 million Kenyans. Even if we were to say that half of that number is actually the number of men and women in the reproductive age, between, let's say, 15 to around 40. That's about 25 million, all right? Now, approximate percentage is that infertility affects about 15 to 20% of the That is the data, and this data is not specific only to Kenya, but it's actually specific to generally across the globe. And what numbers are we looking at? We're looking at about 40% of the cases of infertility, or the causes of infertility for that matter, actually are caused by men, or men are the causes of the 40%. Women are affected by about 35%. And then about 10 to 15%, this one affects both men and women. Then a smaller percentage, about maybe 5-10%, is what we call unknown, in that, yes, we have done the basic tests. We don't seem to find the reason why, but I'm sure if we did, like what my boss used to tell me, if we do a bit more tests, a few more tests, which could be more expensive, we could actually come out with the reason why. All right? So the problem most of the time is with us men. So yes, there it is. Please, men, don't send these women to return to sender, but try and look at yourself in the mirror and evaluate yourself. Maybe the problem is on your side.
All right. I think this is class because, I mean, it's contrary to sort of the norm, I should say.
Absolutely.
Contrary to what culture will dictate, and even contrary to what we would think and believe, because oftentimes we keep thinking this is a woman's issue.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just interesting to hear you say that men account for 40%. The bigger percentage accounts for men. Now we'll come to the causes as we move on momentarily with this conversation, Dr.
Yes.
But now let's also understand, I mean, also when you talk about this infertility issues, at what point then should a couple be worried? Because also we have a case in point whereby there's just this young couple perhaps who got married recently and they feel like we want to stay, have some good time, enjoy ourselves before we start having children. But then at what point should this couple be worried? What are the telltale signs?
I think that 1 year, 2 years, when a couple gives itself time and says we're just going to enjoy ourselves, we are going to learn each other about each other before we start thinking about having, you know, starting a family. But again, contrary to what society expects from you. Society expects that once you get married, the next month actually things should start happening. Why did you get married? You know, that sort of thing. Now, let's say that this couple which has got married and they have taken that quote-unquote time off, they've enjoyed themselves, they have learnt about each other, and now they're ready to actually start that journey of having a family, starting a family. Now, this couple, we assume, number one, that they're having regular intercourse. And by regular here, we mean 2 to 3 times a week. Because there are couples who have intercourse once a week, once a month, sometimes once every 6 months, you know, and so on, because of different reasons. So regular intercourse, 2 to 3 times a week. No contraception. Because again, contraception, obviously, just as the word itself suggests, it's against, you know, conception. So regular intercourse 2 to 3 times a week, no contraception, and 1 year has passed. A whole year of doing this and nothing has actually come out of this. There is a small caveat to this, and this caveat is with regards to the age of the woman. If the age of the woman is more than 35 years or 35 years and more, then that period of, you know, that 1 year is actually reduced to 6 months. So if you are 35 or more and you've been having regular intercourse 2 to 3 times a week, and 6 months have passed and you haven't got you know, a product, you are not pregnant, you're not expectant, then it is time to start, you know, trying to find out what the problem is.
Just allow me to butt in, Dr. there, because you're talking about a couple who have been having regular sex,
absolutely,
intercourse, so to speak, and then they're not using any form of contraception. But one may argue they're using the natural form of contraception, withdrawal method. Then also at this point, is there anything that perhaps would make this couple worried?
First of all, that natural method of contraception, it has such a high failure rate that you can't even call it a natural method of contraception.
So it's not even a method in itself?
It's not even a method. I mean, if something fails 98% time, how can you say it's a natural method? It's not a method
but
after all.
But natural and artificial methods.
Okay. Because when we talk about contraception, there is what we call Pearl's index. The Pearl's index is when you use a certain method of contraception, a certain number of women, about 100 women, who have used this method of contraception for 1 year, how many of them have actually got pregnant? In the so-called natural method, there are 2 or 3 of them. Number one, there is what you call the rhythm method, where you check your body, and this you need to check your temperature every day for about 3 to 6 months, and it should be done at exactly the same time. Let's say in the morning when you wake up, from the same place. Most of the time, it was advised to check it through the vagina, and you plot these temperatures every day on a chart. So at the end of 6 months, 3 to 6 months, we have 6 charts, And we look and see that around day 9, day 10, day 11, there is a slight spike in temperature, meaning that is the ovulation time, all right? Now, this method does not hold water at all. If, for example, you have a common cold, because you have a little bit of fever, it throws everything out of the window. Number two, the other method is what we call Billings method. Billings method is basically where you actually check for cervical mucus every month, because around ovulation time, the way we have been beautifully and wonderfully created, when a woman has ovulation, the mucus in the vagina changes. It becomes watery, it becomes slicky, you know. This is basically to allow the sperm to swim through to get to where they're supposed to get. Now, if you have irregular periods, this method will not help you at all, because you will not have that, you know, that vaginal discharge. The other method, so-called natural method, is what is called coitus interruptus. That one is not even a method. Because it is supposed to be that when you're having intercourse and a man is almost having an orgasm, he's supposed to withdraw, you know, his organs such that he ejaculates outside. Before even we go there, pre-ejaculation, there is some fluid which comes out of the penis, which actually has sperm. So by the time you're withdrawing, your basi imeenda, there is nothing you can do. So you end up getting pregnant, and then you say, tulikuwa tunatumia natural methods, which actually don't help. So if you're going to talk about contraception, let's talk about concrete methods of contraception. All these methods that we've talked about, the natural methods, they're 98-99% failure rate. What we want is actually the other way. We want a failure rate of anywhere between 1% and 4%, which the natural methods don't offer us at all.
All right, now back to that previous question before I just came in. So then, at this point, we are talking about this couple that is choosing to give themselves some time.
That's
and yes, you've earlier on alluded to the fact that we have the culture bounds and what, culture society things.
Yes.
But then at this point, what exactly should make them worried?
Time. 1 year has passed, regular intercourse, no pregnancy. That is what we call primary infertility.
Okay.
And then we also have what we call secondary infertility. In that, again, the same time frames actually apply. The only thing is that with secondary infertility is that this couple have had a pregnancy or have had a child or children before, and they're trying to have another child or children. And then apart from that, something very important, the woman should not be breastfeeding on a regular basis, because breastfeeding in itself actually works as contraception in most cases. Now, this is what should worry this young couple. Let's just work with the premise of a young couple, 20-something years or maybe early 30s, late 20s, and they've got pregnant, and obviously society expects. Mama mkwe anauliza sasa, watu walikuja boma hii yangu na hata sijui uji tutakunywa lini, that sort of thing. Yes. So pressure starts coming, and this pressure usually starts from the most immediate family, the mother-in-law. I know of a case whereby they tried to have a child, and it wasn't working, and the mother-in-law was furious, and he says, you either do something or she goes. And what the couple did is that they went out of the country. They were, in this group whereby they could afford actually to do that. They went and found out that the problem was actually with the man, and they had IVF treatment outside the country, and they got pregnant. So they went for a shopping, quote-unquote, trip for 2 months. They came back, the lady was pregnant, everything was fine, and she delivered a baby boy. Everybody's happy. I mean, this is the fruits of the shopping trip, call it that way, abroad. And then after 2 years or so, the mother-in-law comes again and asks, Kwani, what is happening? Nataka mjukuu mwingine. So again, the pressure came in. And what do? they again took a shopping trip, quote unquote, abroad, and where they had left their embryos, where they were frozen, and they went and did another procedure there, what is called a frozen embryo transfer, and luckily she got pregnant the second time without any problem, and they came back again, of course, expectant, and the mother-in-law was very happy. This time around it was a girl, so she was named after the mother-in-law. Now, imagine there is a couple, a young couple who are not able to do something like that, who are not able to go for such treatment. And here is something else which I want to sort of point out. The mother-in-law could not countenance any other treatment. She could not accept any treatment, for example, in IVF, because they actually went outside the country and they did IVF. That one, for her, it was anathema. So they did not tell the mother-in-law
what they did.
That actually when we went out there, this is what we went and did. It was a secret between themselves. So, coming again to the stigma of infertility.
And we'll come to that in a short while, but I just want us to momentarily just carry on this conversation bit by bit.
No problem.
So we can grasp everything that we need to. But I mean, just talking about that and at least making us understand that this could be the predisposing issues, particularly for a young couple. I know that has sunk in.
Yes.
But also as a doctor and in your practice, at what point would you say that this couple is now, or this person is infertile? What kind of tests are done? What kind of tests do you run even as a doctor? Because you can tell us this when this happens, then this could be the reason. But in terms of tests, what normally happens?
Number one, before we even go to the tests, we need to talk to this couple. And again, I can point out something here. From my experience, and not only from my experience, men don't come for these tests. Very, very few. So
women form the bigger percentage? Women
form the bigger percentage. And then most of the time they come and say, when I ask about your husband, they tell me, mzee alisema weenda upimwe kwanza, alafu unilete report. But you see, the report is not about him.
Yet from the data, it shows that actually men form the bigger percentage.
Men form the bigger percentage, but they don't come. I can say that out of, let's say, 10 or 20 patients that I see in a day, for example, the man who will come alone, maybe 1 out of 20. So a very small percentage. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to talk to this couple. We want to ask a few questions because we want to understand the background. And it is generally accepted and is well understood that by talking to this couple, by taking a medical history, and the medical history will entail, asking the lady about her periods. That is basic, because everything else about reproductive health actually is about the periods, the monthly cycle. And this is my bread and butter as a gynecologist and all gynecologists. Because if that monthly period is off the normal schedule, then obviously so many other things will not happen. So the first question is, when was the first period? Usually ladies have their first periods around 13, 14, 15 years. So the next question is, when was the last period? And these days, thankfully, you have an app. You always look, give me a second, you go into the app, and then the app will tell you, the last period was on a certain date. And then actually, you'll even show me that, Daktari, just look at this. Do you think this is regular? The last time I had it on this date and this date for the last 5-6 months, this is the schedule that it has happened. It has been coming. So we want to ask when the last period was, whether the periods are regular. Very, very important question. Kwa sababu gani? If you remember the method you asked about the natural conception, natural contraception. If the periods are irregular, everything is out of the scale, as it were. So we want to find out whether these periods are regular. Why? Because if a patient comes and says, my periods, I skip periods, sometimes I have a period every 60 days, something is not right. And already in the back of my mind, I start looking at the possible what you call differential, diagnosis. What could be the reason for that? Could it be hormonal? Could it be polycystic ovaries? Could it be that she's having premature ovarian failure? etc, etc. So those ones I put in the parking lot. How many days do the periods take? Oh, my periods take 2, 3 days, 5 days. normal range. If they take 8 days, and then the next question would be, how are the periods? Are they heavy? Are they light? Are they painful? Are there any clots? And all these things. Because every question that I ask actually has a reason, and it will sort of give me a general direction as to what to expect, And then after that, we ask about the general medical history, whether she has any problems, any hypertension, she has suffered any hypertension in the past, diabetes, any surgeries in the past, what kind of surgeries, how were they done, when were they done, how many of them. All these have an impact. Then family history is also very important. In your family, the nuclear family, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, are there any diseases, hereditary diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, sickle cell anemia, for example, etc., etc. And then obviously the other ones are social, social history. What do you do? Again, why is that important? Because exposure to some of the chemicals which are around can affect fertility. The type of jobs that you do, even the men, we will also ask the same questions, because that can also have an impact on their fertility, whether they smoke or whether they drink. These days, we've been talking about empowering the girls, and we've really empowered them in a very good way. We can see, ladies working everywhere. You are here, you can see the cameraman there is a camera person, there is a lady, and they're also in upper echelons, in this society. But then the thing that we need to be cautious about, in as much as we have empowered the girl child, what has come out is that what the man does, or what the men can do, women can do what? Can do better. So women have started smoking. They are drinking like fish, unfortunately, and this is also affecting their infertility as well. So we need to find out about this as well.
That's the lifestyle.
That is the lifestyle. We need to find out whether they are married or not married. Why? Because some of them will tell us, I'm in a second marriage, and then you ask, is this because of the present issue of infertility? They'll say yes. Some of them, I had a patient who had been married 5 times, 6 times, and every time she got married for 3-4 years, and unfortunately there was gender-based violence because she could not produce a baby, and she would leave, and she went and got married again, and so on. So these are very important. Then we also ask about whether any tests that have been done, whether a pap smear has been done, whether because of the duration of the infertility, it has taken 4, 5 years, 6 years, or whatever number of years, whether there are any tests which have been done. And this test, now coming to your question, is this test that we want to do on both the lady and on the gentleman. On the gentleman, it's very easy. When they come, or when they are brought, screaming and fighting and whatever by their partners. For the gentleman, we just want them to give us a sample, a semen sample.
But still, all these other things, do they apply?
We ask all these questions. Okay. We ask the questions whether they are allergic, whether they have had any medical issues, whether they've had any surgeries, family history, what jobs they do, and etc. And whether they have a child or children as well. Very, very important. And then obviously we want to send them for a semen test. Very simple test. We just ask them to abstain from intercourse for 3 to 5 days, and then they go to the lab. They are given a container, and they give us a sample. How is this sample collected? Unfortunately, it has to be done through masturbation. In other places, in the UK, for example,
going against the value.
Again, that is another thing. Say this is an African. We can't do this.
It's an African. It's against the Christian values.
Against the Christian values. I'm not very sure about the Christian, but let's put that aside.
All right.
But it is the most common method that is used to collect a semen sample. There is another method, which is basically there's a particular condom, a special condom designed for this. The normal condoms that are available cannot be used because they have a spermicide. So you can't use it and then you collect sperm from there because most of them will be dead. Now, some of the gentlemen actually try and be smart, and they actually do coitus interruptus and then collect the sample, and then when we get that sample, it's a horrible sample. Why am I saying that? You find that it has a lot of bacteria. It may have some red blood cells. Sometimes there is pus there. So when you look at it, you say, no, either something is drastically wrong with the man himself. He's very sick in his reproductive area, or something not right was done. So when you take a step back and ask, how did you get this sample? Oh, we had intercourse and I had interrupted. Because of, first of all, the vagina has billions of bacteria. So when you have intercourse and then you do that withdrawal and then you collect the sample, actually we will see those bacteria in the sample. So the first thing we think about is that there is something drastically wrong with the reproductive system of this gentleman. Maybe that is why he's actually not having these children. But when he goes and does collects the sample in the proper way, you find it's completely different. So for the man, it's just semen or sperm test. Now for the ladies, of course, ladies are a bit more complicated. That's why we love them, because they are complicated.
And they would always be the ones who would be coming. And
they're the ones who are actually more open, and they will come and they will share this information with their friends and so on. So for the ladies, we actually start, after we've taken that history, we start by doing a blood test. Basically, we are looking at 3 hormones, and these hormones are, one of them is called AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, and this one tells us about the ovarian reserve, a very, very important element in the treatment of infertility. Why? Because ladies are born with a set number of eggs, and every month you guys have a period, you lose about 500 to 800 eggs. So imagine if you started your periods at around 13 years and you're now, let's say, 35 years or 36 or 37, and you don't have a child, meaning if you do the maths, let's work with a conservative number of about 500. So 500 eggs times 12 months in a year times 20, how many years? 22 or 23 years. Yeah. So that's
13.
You start with 13, so let's say 22 years. So you have lost a huge number of eggs. So by the time we start doing these tests, that ovarian reserve has actually reduced. And when the ovarian reserve reduces, the quality of the eggs also depletes with time. So that is why for ladies after 35 years, it is a little bit more difficult for them to get pregnant, especially if it is the first time. So we need to do that test. We need to do a test called TSH, T for Tom, S for Simon, and H for house. This is a hormone produced by a gland which is right here in front of the voice box. A very, very important gland, because this gland works like I call it the manager of other hormones in the body. If it is elevated, if the hormone is elevated or is low, it means that the body will not be functioning normally. And if the body is not functioning normally, it will have a knock-on effect on the reproduction as well, on the fertility as well. So we need to check that. We also need to check a hormone called prolactin. Prolactin is a hormone which tells the breasts to produce milk, especially when a woman is pregnant. The body, as I said, we are beautifully and wonderfully made. God created the female body such that once that baby has implanted and that baby is growing, provision is already starting to be made of how this baby is going to feed, and what this baby is going to feed on, and how nutritious whatever this milk is going to be. And this milk, it has all the nutrients, all the antibodies and so on to protect this young life, and so that this young life can actually grow in a healthy way. So we check that prolactin. Now the problem is sometimes you can have an elevated prolactin level and you're not pregnant. And what that actually does to the body is that the body knows that when prolactin is elevated, you are expecting somebody is going to make use of that milk which is being produced. So if there is no pregnancy there, but prolactin level is elevated, the body shuts itself off. So you can't get pregnant. So we want to check these hormones. We want to check the tubes, whether they are okay. Remember the fourth form biology, where that we have 2 fallopian tubes, and and that sperm passes through the tubes in order to get to the egg. And actually fertilization occurs at a particular point in the tube, not just at any other point. It's a particular point. A specific point called the isthmus. So that is where the sperm congregate around the egg which has been released, and then one of them will just drill a tiny hole and get in, and the egg will be closed. No other sperm will be able to get in. Now we need to find out whether these tubes are okay. And how do we do this? The gold standard is a test called HSG. Hysterosalpingogram, a little bit of a mouthful. Now, what happens is that it also has to be done at a particular time in the cycle, around day 10, day 11, where we send these ladies to an imaging center. Something is inserted in the vagina, and we inject what is called a contrast. And as we are doing this, X-ray pictures are taken, a series of them, not only one. Usually there are 4 pictures. What do we see? In the first picture is usually an empty picture, no contrast. So we just want to look at the contours of the uterus and want to see whether we can be able to see the tubes. Ideally, we don't see the tubes in the empty picture. But if we see them, then there is a problem straight away. In this progressive pictures, we give the patient a little bit of contrast, 5 milliliters, and then 10 milliliters, and then 15 milliliters. As the contrast goes through the uterus, if the tubes are okay, it's supposed to flow out into what we call the pelvis, and we take pictures. Then we can actually look at those pictures and say, these tubes are okay, or these tubes are not okay. If they are not okay, what is the problem? There could be a blockage. One of them could be blocked, the other one could be okay, both of them could be blocked.
Is that the hydrosalpinx?
Hydrosalpinx is coming to that. Okay. Now, if they are blocked and there is fluid in them, that is what we call hydrosalpinx. Okay. And then something very interesting is that in those tubes there are microscopic hairs which you can't see.
We are still on the test.
We are still on the test. We are still on the test. Okay. Those hairs are very, very important because they secrete I just want to explain where the fluid comes from.
Yes.
They secrete a small amount of fluid which is almost mucus-like, and this fluid actually helps the egg to slide through the tube such that it can be able to meet with the sperm. And once fertilization has occurred, it also helps. The tubes do make a movement, what we call peristaltic movement, just like the intestines. And as they do that, they actually push the fertilized what we call an embryo to the destination where it is supposed to get, which is inside the womb. And when it gets into the womb again, that embryo releases a tiny amount of acid by the way, and it drills a tiny hole and it clings onto the lining, what we call the endometrium. And again, before that, provision has been made. That lining is thick, the vessels are extended, there is an accumulation of glucose such that that embryo will actually have nutrition so that it will grow in the way it is supposed to be.
So all these are just the tests.
Just the test. And then the last one.
Okay.
The last one for the lady, what we want to do, a scan, an ultrasound scan. And that scan is usually done transvaginally. Why? Because then we take that ultrasound, what we call a transducer, then we get very close to the ovaries, then we can actually see the ovary, and on one side and on the other side. Then we can also assess the uterus. We look at the endometrium, that is what we call the lining of the womb. Usually that is where the baby implants. We also look at the womb itself to see whether there are any problems. For example, some of our viewers can have heard about fibroids or fibroids, depends on the way it is pronounced. We can see whether there are fibroids there. If they are there, how many of them, where are they located, what is the size, and so on. So now once we have all these tests, we have the sperm test results, we have the HSG, we have the hormone test, and we have the scan, we can now sit and say, look, let us now look at this and see where the problem is.
Wow. I mean, when you see men refusing to go, it's not an easy task. That's why I said this is class. And, you know, my director's just whispered on my ear that we are almost about to close, and I'm like, but ndo tumeanza tu hii conversation. I hope we can get some more time to you know, break this down, because I feel this is really important.
I think it is.
You know, just for also our Kenyan population to understand,
Absolutely.
and also for the men to understand what exactly this means. But even as you try to, you know, draw this convo to a close, Daktari,
yes,
I'd want you to just talk to us about those that have tried all this, because also in your explanation you've tried and mentioned IVF,
yes,
a bit there, you've tried and mentioned the frozen eggs,
yes,
you've talked about, you know, the various forms perhaps people could, couples could use, and also what exactly causes this infertility.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, at what point you conclude through the test that you've really explained very well. So all these things have been tried. Let's now assume that a couple has done all these things that you've mentioned, like yes, I've talked about the various medical forms and all these other forms.
That is right.
And nothing is sort of happening, and then they resort to sorcery or miti shamba. As KOGS, what would you say?
I am, from where I sit as the president of the Kenyan Obstetrical and Gynaecological Society, yes, what I would say is that it is very sad when our members actually resort, or our viewers, the Kenyan population resort to mitishamba, kwa waganga, you know, and so on. And I think this is more of the sociological aspect of infertility, whereby, again, where we are coming from, our societies, there are myths, there are things that if you don't understand, if something is not working, then it cannot be understood, and we throw it in the basket of, you know, ukurogwa. Nimerogwa, mama mkwe amenifunga, sijui alifunga wapi,
na yeye ndiye
amefanya nisipate mimba, you know, all that. I had a patient who came and told me, you know, Daktari, I'm a very strong believer. Actually, I think she was in the praise group in church. But I've come to see you because I have this problem. And of course, I sent her for all these tests. And she said, I go to church and I pray. And my pastor, my reverend, whoever prays for me. But I still go to somebody, muganga, nae pia kaangalie pande ile. It's like, you know, hedging her bets, just in case this doesn't happen, this one may be able to help me. This, what I would advise our Kenyans, Kenyan people, is that please don't go to waganga because you don't know what is happening. There are scientifically proven methods of actually finding out where the problem is, and we can actually scientifically treat these problems, and they are successful, and they can be able to have a family of their own.
Good place to end it, but sad place because you haven't really exhausted everything.
Maybe next time.
Next time we should, because I also wanted us to talk about the myths. There are so many of them out there.
There's so many.
IVF and the various forms of methods that are there, you know, in existence. Adoption, is it even an option at the end of the day?
It is an option.
But we didn't have time.
We didn't have time.
You can be able to get some more time to do
myths, and the myths are many. That if you have a period, a regular period, then you are, then obviously you are fertile. That is a myth, because if your tubes are blocked, you will always have a period. Obviously, you won't have a baby. For the gentleman, is that if you have an ejaculate, if you are ejaculating, then you are okay. Not true, because you can be ejaculating, but it's only fluid without sperm, for example.
What do you call the blanks?
I don't want to use that word because.
All right, let's not continue for a lot of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are out of time, but this has been quite an interesting, as I mentioned. I hope we can be able to get more time to just talk about these issues further. Nonetheless, I have been speaking to Dr. Kireki Omanwa, who is a fertility expert, current president at Kenya Obstetrical and Gynaecological Society, as well as a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Education, obviously talking to us about matters to do with infertility, again, amongst men and women, and again, this also being the Infertility Awareness Month. Good place to end it, and ultimately a good place to end Good Morning Kenya this Tuesday morning. Asante sana for your time, and thank you so much for watching. Again, on behalf of the entire team, we again say thank you so much. We do this again tomorrow. Have a beautiful Tuesday morning.